Becky was the guest on something called A Touch More. I know this sounds like a show that's exclusive to OnlyFans, but A Touch More is a podcast hosted by the Sue Bird and the inspiration of prepubescent boys, Meg Rapinoe. They were talking to Rebecca Lobo about the unreasonable demands made by WNBA.
That is Rebecca Lobo, one of the original WNBA players from 1997 and now an ESPN analyst, and she just said something that should genuinely terrify every player in the league right now. According to Lobo, WNBA players are rapidly losing fan support during the current CBA negotiations. But here's what makes this especially devastating. She didn't say it on a hot take show like First Take. She said it on Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe's podcast. This wasn't some outsider criticizing the league. This was a WNBA legend speaking on a platform hosted by WNBA royalty and telling them directly that the players are mishandling this situation. So the question becomes, what exactly did these players do to lose support they supposedly never had in the first place?
Their inability of maintaining support from the fan base. You had the fans' support. All you had to do was shut the hell up. Instead, you displayed your unbelievable entitlement by calling million-dollar annual salaries a slap in the face. When I played in this dump, we were playing for prizes, free scooters, tricycles, just for men, and you have the audacity to complain about receiving $1 million you haven't earned?
Watch that again. Rebecca Lobo is openly criticizing current WNBA players for the way they have handled CBA negotiations. She says the players actually had fan support and all they had to do was stay quiet. Instead, they displayed what she described as unbelievable entitlement by calling million-dollar salaries a slap in the face. This criticism is coming from someone who played in an era where athletes competed for prizes and free scooters instead of real paychecks. But this moment isn't just about hurt feelings or salary complaints. It reveals something much larger. It exposes a fundamental shift that is happening right now in the balance of power between the league and its players.
Combat. It was a seminal moment for a number of reasons. This contract, it shaped the future of the business, but it also changed the mindset. It changed the mentality of Vince McMahon. With Bret Hart, it was one of the first times that a star talent had more leverage than the company. It was the first time that Vince McMahon felt powerless in negotiations. He made a promise to himself to never be put in that situation again. He would never allow one of the employees to have more.
The Bret Hart comparison is far more relevant than it initially sounds. In the late 1990s, Vince McMahon signed Bret Hart to a massive WWF contract worth millions of dollars. At the time, it was unprecedented money. More importantly, it marked the first moment when a performer had more leverage than the company itself. McMahon felt powerless during those negotiations, and he made a promise to himself that day. Never again would he allow an employee to have more power than the brand. He would never let a single talent become bigger than the WWF itself. Right now, Cathy Engelbert is facing that exact same moment. For the first time in WNBA history, players believe they have power. They believe the Caitlin Clark ratings bump and the emergence of leagues like Unrivaled give them leverage. Whether that perception is accurate doesn't matter. Perception alone drives negotiation behavior. And just like Vince McMahon in 1997, Cathy Engelbert is now making moves to ensure this never happens again.
At Sports Media Watch, WNBA pushing earlier start and later finish to the pretend basketball season. When I initially saw this headline the other day, I was confused. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't remember anyone asking for more pretend basketball. I don't remember seeing this insatiable demand, this unquenchable desire for more women's basketball. Matter of fact, if you look at ratings and attendance for Unrivaled, or the fact that absolutely no one is talking about women's college basketball, or the fact that the WNBA Finals struggled to sell tickets with tickets going for less.
This is where the real power play begins. The WNBA wants to expand the regular season from 44 games to 54 games, adding 10 additional games. Training camp would begin in March, and the WNBA Finals would stretch into November. On the surface, This looks like a revenue-driven decision. More games mean more ticket sales, more broadcast windows, and more sponsorship opportunities. But when you examine the calendar closely, it becomes clear this move isn't about money. It's about control. If this proposal passes, WNBA players would have no real break between the unrivaled season and WNBA training camp. They would be playing basketball year-round with no opportunity to compete overseas. The league already enforces prioritization rules that punish players who miss training camp due to overseas commitments. This new schedule forces players into an impossible decision. You can play in the WNBA, or you can play in secondary leagues overseas or in unrivaled, but you will no longer be able to do both.
4 games to a maximum of 54 games. This would give WNBA players 10 more opportunities to prove they can't sell tickets. But I don't think this is about money. Or in the case of the WNBA, I don't think this is about increasing the amount of the money that they are losing. This schedule is about power. It's about control, leverage. The league wants training camp to start in March, with the WNBA Finals, also known as the Chase for the Platinum Pooper, concluding in November.
This is a brilliant strategic move by Cathy Engelbert. She isn't negotiating. She's reminding players who actually holds the power. For years, WNBA players have lived under a delusion. They've convinced themselves they are equivalent to NBA players. They believe they are bigger than the league itself. In their minds, the employees are more powerful than the employer. But reality is about to set in. WNBA players are entry-level workers in the sports economy. They are a bonus, not a necessity. Entry-level employees are hired when companies are thriving to support the true revenue generators. When budgets tighten, those workers are the first to go. Not out of cruelty, but because the business doesn't actually need them to survive.
Now, of course, Unrivaled is already doing a phenomenal job of putting themselves out of business, but with this new schedule, overpaid players in Unrivaled, they would have no break between the Unrivaled season and the WNBA season. This proposal, it essentially forces WNBA players into making a choice. Due to prioritization, the WNBA penalizes players who don't show up to training camp because they're competing in another league.
Now think about what would happen if WNBA players went on strike today. Fans wouldn't care because WNBA fans barely exist outside of the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. NBA owners wouldn't care either, because this league loses them money every single year. In fact, they would save money if the players walked out. That's not leverage. That's the complete absence of leverage. Compare that to the NBA. If NBA players threatened to strike, the league would immediately enter crisis mode. Billions in revenue would disappear overnight. Broadcast partners would demand refunds. Sponsors would pull out. NBA owners would concede almost anything to prevent that outcome. In contrast, a WNBA strike would essentially be an early vacation for everyone involved.
Employees think they are more powerful than the employer, when the reality is, WNBA players are the equivalent of entry-level employees. Entry-level workers, they're a bonus. Entry-level workers are hired when the company is thriving to assist those who are actually generating the revenue. But when times get tough, when management slashes the budget, the entry-level workers, they are the first to be.
This is what makes the situation fascinating. The illusion of leverage. WNBA players genuinely believe they have power right now. Attendance went from nothing to almost nothing, and they interpret that as a mandate. Ratings increased largely because one player, Caitlin Clark, became a cultural phenomenon, and suddenly players believe they deserve NBA-level compensation. Unrivaled and overseas leagues are offering contracts, so players assume they have options. But all of that is smoke and mirrors. None of it translates into real negotiating power when your employer is subsidizing your entire existence.
I have told you guys from the beginning, this leverage that WNBA players think they have, this leverage is an illusion. The increased ratings, attendance going from nothing to almost nothing, secondary dumps like Unrivaled and Project B, this gave WNBA players the illusion of leverage. If you took this same situation and you applied it to the NBA, the league would be in trouble. NBA players would get whatever the hell they wanted, but with the WNBA, the same leverage does not apply because this league isn't a necessity. It's a bonus. It's a nice tax write-off for the NBA. But if it goes away, they'll just find another way to ease their tax burden. The way it looks right now, if WNBA players want their $1 million annual contracts, if they want to be paid what they deserve, they're going to have to make some concessions. And the main concession seems to be unrivaled, going out of business.
Here's what this new schedule proposal actually accomplishes. If WNBA players truly want $1 million contracts, salaries they are calling a slap in the face despite not generating the revenue to justify them, they will be forced to make concessions. The main concession is this: Unrivaled goes out of business. Unrivaled's entire business model depends on having access to WNBA talent during the off-season from January through March. They pay players 6 figures for 8 weeks of work. But if the WNBA season runs from March through November, Unrivaled loses its entire talent pool. Players can no longer participate in both leagues without violating prioritization rules and risking their WNBA salaries. Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart founded Unrivaled to give players a domestic option during the off-season. They raised millions in funding, secured broadcast deals, and convinced 30 players to commit. Now the WNBA is about to make that business model impossible. This isn't accidental. This is Cathy Engelbert systematically eliminating any alternative source of leverage for players. Rebecca Lobo's comments reveal how the old guard views the situation. She played in an era of embarrassingly low salaries and prize-based compensation. From her perspective, current players sound ungrateful, complaining about million-dollar offers. But this isn't really about gratitude or entitlement. It's about power. It's about whether employees can dictate terms to their employer. And the answer here is becoming very clear. The WNBA is not a necessity. It's a tax write-off. It's a symbolic gesture toward gender equity. It's a way for NBA owners to demonstrate social responsibility. If the league disappeared tomorrow, the NBA would simply fund another charitable cause. That is not true for the players. Without the WNBA, most of these athletes have nowhere else to go. Overseas leagues don't pay enough. Unrivaled can't survive without the WNBA off-season. No other domestic league exists, so when players threaten to opt out of the CBA or demand 50% revenue sharing like the NBA, they are negotiating from a position of complete weakness. They are pretending to have leverage they don't actually possess, and the league knows it. That's why this schedule proposal isn't really a proposal. It's an ultimatum. Play by our rules, accept our terms, and stop pretending you have other options, because we're about to eliminate those options entirely. The Vince McMahon and Bret Hart comparison keeps coming back because it fits perfectly. McMahon learned in 1997 that allowing talent to become bigger than the brand creates an unsustainable business model. He spent the next 25 years ensuring no wrestler ever held that level of leverage again. Cathy Engelbert is applying the same philosophy now. She is making sure the WNBA brand, weak as it may be, remains more important than any individual player. Even Caitlin Clark doesn't have enough power to dictate terms. If she walked away tomorrow, the league would still exist. It would return to empty arenas and minimal viewership, but it would survive. The NBA would continue funding it for public relations purposes, just as it has for 27 years. That's the reality WNBA players are refusing to accept. One season of increased ratings convinced them everything had changed. They misread the moment. The ratings bump came from one player. Attendance gains were concentrated in a handful of games. The rest of the league remained invisible. Players demanded salaries over $1 million, called lesser offers insulting, compared themselves to NBA players, and acted entitled to money they hadn't earned. In doing so, they handed Cathy Engelbert all the justification she needed to reassert control. This proposal will likely pass. Players will complain publicly. Some will threaten to sit out or play overseas. But ultimately, they will comply because they have no alternative. Unrivaled will either collapse or pivot. Overseas leagues will continue paying modest salaries. And the power dynamic will reset to where it has always been. Rebecca Lobo's comments were a warning shot. Players ignored it. And now they are about to learn the difference between perceived leverage and real power the hard way.